The massive holographic display flickered with red warning lights as another star system vanished from the galactic map. Chancellor Mordun's crystalline body trembled as he watched 3 billion lives disappear in an instant. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Confederation had been going on for 3 days straight, and still no one had any answers. That makes 17 systems in the past month, announced Fleet Admiral Ziwaxera, her blue skin pale with exhaustion. The Void Harbingers are moving faster than we predicted. At this rate, they will reach our core worlds within 6 months. The enormous chamber fell silent except for the soft humming of life support systems. Representatives from 47 different alien species sat in their floating seats, each one looking more desperate than the last. The Axiom Collective's best scientists had failed. The Helix Empire's mighty war fleets had been destroyed. Even the ancient keepers with their million years of knowledge had nothing to offer. Ambassador Veltar of the Axiom Collective stood up slowly, his tentacles drooping with defeat. Perhaps we should discuss evacuation plans. We could retreat to the outer rim galaxies and hope the Harbingers lose interest. Run away. Chancellor Mordun's voice cracked like breaking glass. We are the Galactic Confederation. We have stood for peace and progress for 10,000 years. We cannot simply abandon everything we have built. But even as he spoke, everyone in the room knew the truth. They were beaten. The Void Harbingers were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. These ancient creatures consumed entire worlds, turning thriving planets into empty husks of rock and dust. They moved through space like living shadows, their massive ships absorbing energy weapons and deflecting physical attacks as if they were nothing more than gentle rain. Dr. Kexera, the Confederation's top scientist, projected her research onto the main screen. The images showed the aftermath of Harbinger attacks. Dead worlds with gray skies and empty oceans. Cities turned to ash. No life remained anywhere the creatures had passed. We have tried everything, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Quantum disruptors, plasma cannons, antimatter bombs, psionic attacks. Nothing works. They seem to feed on our energy weapons, growing stronger with each shot we fire. Our shields mean nothing to them. They pass through our defenses like we are not even there. Admiral Korthak of the Helix Empire slammed his massive fist on his desk. My fleets have fought in 1,000 battles across the galaxy. We have never known defeat. But these things, they destroyed my entire armada in less than an hour. Ships that took decades to build, crews trained from birth, weapons that could crack planets in half. All gone. The room filled with murmurs of fear and despair. Many representatives were already making plans to evacuate their home worlds. Some species spoke of hiding in the deepest parts of space, hoping the Harbingers would not find them. Others discussed surrender, though no one knew if the creatures would even understand the concept. Chancellor Mordun tried to maintain order, but his own hope was fading fast. He had led the Confederation through wars and disasters before, but nothing like this. The Harbingers were not just another enemy army. They were a force of pure destruction, erasing everything in their path without mercy or reason. There must be something we have missed, he pleaded. Some weapon, some strategy, some ancient knowledge that could help us fight back. The silence that followed was the heaviest sound in the room. 47 civilizations, representing millions of years of combined evolution and scientific progress, had absolutely nothing to offer. All their advanced technology, all their brilliant minds, all their military might had proven useless against this ancient evil. Ambassador Veltar spoke again, his voice hollow with defeat. Perhaps this is simply our time. Every civilization must end eventually. Maybe the Harbingers are nature's way of cleaning the galaxy, making room for new life to grow. No. The shout came from the back of the chamber. Junior Archivist Plexini, a small creature from the Archives Division, stood up with his data pad clutched in his tentacles. I refuse to believe that. There has to be something. Some species we have not contacted, some weapon we have not tried. Chancellor Mordun looked at the young archivist with tired eyes. We have contacted every known intelligent species in the galaxy, Plexini. If there was anyone else who could help, we would have found them by now. But Plexini was already heading for the door. Not everyone, Chancellor. Not everyone. As the archivist rushed out of the chamber, the meeting continued with more discussions of evacuation and surrender. None of the great leaders suspected that their salvation might come from the most unlikely source of all. Somewhere in the dusty archives, buried among millions of old files, lay the records of a species that had been rejected long ago for being too violent and unpredictable. The Void Harbingers continued their relentless advance across the galaxy, consuming world after world. But they had made one critical mistake. They had never encountered humans before. And humans had a very different definition of the word impossible. The archives building stretched deep underground beneath the Confederation capital, its endless corridors filled with the collected knowledge of 10,000 years. Junior archivist Plexani moved through the dimly lit halls with desperate purpose, his small tentacles dancing across data pads as he searched through forgotten records. He had been working for 18 hours straight, his eyes burning from staring at ancient files. Somewhere in this vast collection had to be something the High Council had overlooked. Some species, some weapon, some piece of knowledge that could save them all. Most of the records were useless. Trading agreements with extinct civilizations. Scientific reports on dead stars. Diplomatic notes about border disputes that no longer mattered. But Plexani kept searching, driven by a stubborn refusal to give up. Then he found it. The file was buried deep in the rejected applications section, marked with warning symbols and stamped with red letters that said, "Denied permanent exclusion." The header read, "Species application, system, designation, humans." Plexani's tentacles trembled as he opened the file. The report was 300 years old, written by Ambassador Rixtal after the first contact mission to Earth. What he read made his blood run cold. Species exhibits extreme territorial behavior and aggressive tendencies, the report began. Constant warfare among their own kind. They use primitive chemical explosives and projectile weapons to kill each other over resources, ideology, and territorial disputes. Recommendation: permanent exclusion from Confederation. Too dangerous for civilized contact. But as Plexani read further, certain details caught his attention. Subject species shows unusual persistence in the face of overwhelming odds, one section noted. During observation period, witnessed multiple instances of individuals sacrificing themselves for complete strangers. Species appears incapable of accepting defeat, even when survival is impossible. Another report described a human military engagement where vastly outnumbered soldiers held a position for days against impossible odds, simply because they had been ordered to do so. The Confederation observer wrote with obvious confusion about humans who continued fighting even when they were wounded, even when their weapons were broken, even when they had no hope of victory. Most disturbing, read another section, is their tendency to protect other species. During a natural disaster on their planet, humans risked their own lives to save domestic animals and even wild creatures. This behavior makes no logical sense from an evolutionary standpoint. Plexani's hearts began beating faster as he read tactical reports that the original survey team had gathered. Humans had something called guerrilla warfare, where small groups of fighters could hold off much larger armies using unconventional tactics. They had a concept called total war, where entire populations would resist invaders, turning every civilian into a potential soldier. But what really caught his attention was a small note at the bottom of the file. Species shows remarkable adaptability, it read. In just 100 years they progressed from primitive flight to interplanetary travel. When faced with new challenges they do not retreat or negotiate. They innovate and overcome. Plexani's tentacles moved faster as he accessed more recent surveillance reports. The humans were still there in their soul system, still fighting among themselves, but also working together in ways that confused Confederation observers. They had built space stations and colonies on nearby planets. They had developed fusion power and artificial intelligence. Most importantly, they had never stopped preparing for war. The young archivist found video recordings from recent monitoring missions. He watched human soldiers training in environments that would kill most Confederation species. Humans jumping out of aircraft without proper protection. Humans fighting hand-to-hand in conditions that should have been lethal. Humans working together to solve problems with a speed and creativity that amazed their observers. One report from just 50 years ago described a human response to a natural disaster that had destroyed several of their cities. Instead of fleeing or seeking help from other planets, they had rebuilt everything in less than a decade. They had made their new cities stronger than before, better prepared for future disasters. They learned from pain, the observer had written. Each failure makes them more determined. Each loss teaches them something new. This species does not know how to quit. Plexani gathered all the files and ran through the corridors toward the emergency session chamber. His small legs carried him as fast as they could go, his mind racing with possibilities. The great powers of the galaxy had failed because they fought the harbingers with logic and advanced technology. But what if the key to victory was not advanced thinking but primitive stubbornness? He burst through the chamber doors, nearly dropping his data pads in his excitement. The assembled representatives looked at him with annoyance. clearly frustrated at being interrupted by a lowly archivist. "Hi, Chancellor." Plex and I gasped, trying to catch his breath. "I found something. There is a species we never contacted. We rejected them 3 centuries ago for being too violent and unpredictable." Chancellor Mordun's crystalline form flickered with what might have been the first sign of hope anyone had seen in weeks. "What species? Where are they?" "Humans," Plex and I said, holding up the files. "From the Sol system. We turned them away because they were too aggressive, too primitive. But Chancellor, that might be exactly what we need." The chamber erupted in confused voices, but Plex and I pressed on. "They never surrender. Ever. Even when they should. Even when it makes no sense. And they have something we have lost." "What?" asked Admiral Zyaxera. Plex and I looked around the room at the defeated faces of the galaxy's greatest civilizations. "Hope," he said simply. "They still believe they can win any fight." The United Earth Defense Command headquarters buzzed with activity like a kicked anthill. Admiral Young-Soo Choi stood in the main briefing room, watching his officers study the alien data that had arrived just 6 hours ago. The holographic displays showed star maps filled with red zones where entire civilizations had simply vanished. Captain Daeho Kim finished reading the tactical report and looked up with disbelief. "Sir, according to this, these void harbingers have destroyed 17 star systems in the past month. Billions of lives gone. And they want our help," added Captain Mi Young-han, her voice filled with bitter irony. "The same aliens who told us we were too primitive to join their fancy club 300 years ago." Admiral Young-Soo nodded grimly. The alien envoy, Ambassador Veltar, sat in the corner of the room looking uncomfortable in his environmental suit. His species breathed a different atmosphere, but he had insisted on delivering the message in person. "Admiral," the alien ambassador spoke through his translator, "I understand your hesitation. The Confederation made a mistake when we rejected your species. We were wrong to judge you as too violent. But now that violence may be the galaxy's only hope." Lieutenant Commander Ji-hoon Park, the youngest officer in the room, stood up from his data terminal. "Sir, I have been studying their weapons and tactics. Every advanced civilization in the galaxy uses energy-based weapons. Plasma cannons, quantum disruptors, antimatter beams. But according to these reports, the Harbingers seem to absorb energy attacks and grow stronger." "What about their physical defenses?" asked Captain Daeho. "Strong but not perfect," Ji-hoon replied. "Their ships have thick armor, but it can be damaged by kinetic impacts. The problem is, no Confederation species uses kinetic weapons anymore. They all moved to energy weapons centuries ago because they are more efficient." Engineer Sojin Kwan, who had been quietly working at her station, suddenly looked up with excitement. "But we still use kinetic weapons. Railguns, missile systems, projectile cannons. We never fully switched to energy weapons because we could not afford to." Admiral Young-Soo felt a strange smile cross his face. For 300 years, Earth had been isolated, forced to develop their own technology without alien help. What the Confederation saw as primitive might actually be their greatest advantage. "How long would it take to retrofit our entire fleet?" he asked. 2 weeks for basic modifications," Sojin replied quickly. "But sir, we only have 300 ships. The Confederation has thousands and they all failed." "Numbers do not win wars," said Captain Mi-young. "Strategy wins wars. And humans have something these aliens have never learned." "What is that?" asked Ambassador Veltar. Captain Daeho answered for her. "We know how to lose everything and keep fighting anyway." The next 12 hours passed in a blur of activity. Admiral Young-Soo called every ship captain in the Earth Defense Fleet. He expected arguments, questions about payment, demands for guarantees. Instead, he got something that surprised even him. Every single captain volunteered immediately. Captain Sunwoo Lee of the battleship Busan did not even wait for the full briefing. "When do we leave?" was his only question. Captain Hyunji Yoon of the destroyer Incheon had a similar response. "My crew is ready now. We can launch within the hour." Even the merchant marine captains volunteered their cargo ships for conversion to military use. Captain Minho Park of the freighter Taejun spent his own savings to buy weapons for his ship. Engineer Sojin worked around the clock with her team, modifying human weapons to work against alien technology. They took apart mining equipment and turned it into ship-mounted cannons. They converted industrial lasers into precision cutting tools for boarding operations. They even modified construction robots to work as combat units in the vacuum of space. "This is insane." Ambassador Veltar watched the preparations with growing amazement. Your species is preparing to fight an enemy that destroyed civilizations millions of years more advanced than you. And you are doing it with mining equipment and cargo ships. That is the point, replied Admiral Young-Soo. Your advanced civilizations think like civilized people. They use proper tactics, proper weapons, proper strategies. The Harbingers have learned to defeat proper warfare. And humans? Lieutenant Commander Ji-hoon grinned as he watched technicians weld armor plating onto a converted passenger liner. We do not fight proper wars, Ambassador. We fight dirty wars. We fight desperate wars. We fight wars where the only rule is winning. Captain Na-rae Park, the fleet communications officer, approached with a message pad. Sir, I have been in contact with our colony ships at Alpha Centauri and Proxima. They are sending every available vessel to join the fleet. How many? 50 more ships, sir. Mostly civilian vessels, but the colonists are mounting whatever weapons they can find. Ambassador Veltar's translator crackled as he spoke. But why? These are not even your worlds under threat. The Harbingers have not reached your system yet. You could stay here safely while the rest of the galaxy burns. The room fell silent for a moment. Then Admiral Young-Soo walked to the main display, which showed the red zones where billions had died. Because that is not who we are, he said simply. When someone needs help, humans answer. It does not matter if they are strangers. It does not matter if they rejected us before. It does not matter if the fight seems impossible. He turned to face the alien ambassador. Your people called us too violent, too primitive. Maybe you were right. But sometimes the galaxy needs people who are too stupid to know when they are beaten. The fleet launched 2 days later. The space around the Proxima defense line looked like a graveyard of stars. Burning wreckage from both human and alien ships drifted through the darkness, while the massive black forms of Void Harbinger vessels moved between them like hunting wolves. Captain Dae-ho Kim watched his tactical display from the bridge of the UES Seoul, counting the red dots that showed damaged human ships. They had been fighting for 22 hours straight. Half the human fleet was gone, but something impossible was happening. For the first time in months, the Harbingers were actually taking damage. Captain, Communications Officer Na-rae Park called out, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. The Busan is reporting critical hull damage, but Captain Sun-woo is requesting permission to ram the Harbinger flagship. Dae-ho did not hesitate. Permission granted. Tell him to make it count. On the main screen, they watched as the battleship Busan, trailing fire and atmosphere from dozens of holes in her hull, turned toward the largest Harbinger vessel. The alien ship was easily 10 times bigger, its dark surface absorbing light like a living shadow. Any sane captain would have retreated. Captain Sun-woo was not feeling particularly sane. Ambassador Veltar, strapped into a seat on the Seoul's bridge, watched in horror as the human ship accelerated directly toward certain death. This is madness. Your captain is committing suicide. No, replied Lieutenant Commander Ji-hoon Park, who was coordinating the tactical display. He is buying us time. The Busan struck the Harbinger flagship at full speed. The explosion lit up space like a tiny star being born. When the light faded, both ships were gone, but the massive Harbinger dreadnought was listing to one side, dark fluid leaking from a huge wound in its hull. Impossible, whispered one of the alien observers. Nothing has been able to damage their flagships before. Captain Dae-ho smiled grimly. Captain Sun-woo just proved that anything can be damaged if you hit it hard enough. Across the battlefield, other human ships were discovering the same truth. Captain Mi Young-han led a boarding party from the destroyer Incheon, using nothing but combat suits and handheld weapons to breach a Harbinger cruiser. The aliens aboard the Seoul watched in amazement as the humans fought their way through the vacuum of space, cutting holes in enemy armor with industrial tools. How are they surviving in open space? Asked Ambassador Veltar. Engineer Sojin Kwan, monitoring the boarding operation from her station, answered without looking up. We modified construction suits for combat use. They are built to work in the worst conditions imaginable. Extreme heat, extreme cold, radiation, zero atmosphere. Human construction workers deal with more dangerous environments than most alien soldiers. On another part of the battlefield, Captain Hyun Ji-yoon was coordinating what she called a swarm attack. Dozens of converted cargo ships, mining vessels, and civilian transports surrounded a Harbinger destroyer like angry bees around a bear. Each ship was too small to do serious damage alone, but together they were overwhelming the enemy vessel's defenses. Target their weapon ports, Hyun-ji commanded over the comm system. Use the mining charges to blow holes in their armor, then hit those holes with everything we have. The Harbinger ship tried to turn and flee, but human ships were faster and more maneuverable. They had been designed for asteroid mining and deep space construction, work that required precision flying in dangerous conditions. The alien vessels, built for battles between organized fleets, could not cope with the chaotic human tactics. Admiral Young-Soo, commanding the operation from his flagship, watched as more Harbinger vessels began to retreat. It was the first time in the war that the ancient enemy had shown any sign of fear. "Admiral," Captain Nare reported from the communication station, "the Confederation forces are requesting permission to join the attack. They want to copy our tactics." "Tell them to stay back and learn," Young-Soo replied. "This is human work." But the aliens were learning. Captain Zorkan of the Confederation cruiser Bright Hope watched as Engineer Sojin's jury-rigged weapons tore through Harbinger armor that had resisted their best technology for months. He began modifying his own ship's weapons, replacing energy cannons with kinetic projectiles. The tide of battle was turning, but the cost was enormous. Captain Sunwoo was dead along with his entire crew. Captain Minho Park's converted freighter had been vaporized while covering a retreat. Dozens of other human ships lay in ruins among the stars. But for every human ship destroyed, a Harbinger vessel was damaged or driven away. The ancient enemy, which had consumed entire civilizations without effort, was being hurt by a species they had never encountered before. "I do not understand," Ambassador Veltar said as he watched another Harbinger ship explode under human fire. "Your weapons are primitive. Your ships are smaller. Your technology is centuries behind ours. How are you winning?" Captain Deho looked at the tactical display, where green dots showing human ships continued to press their attack despite heavy losses. "Because you fight to win battles, Ambassador. We fight because we refuse to lose wars." On the screen, Captain Mi-young's boarding party had taken control of the Harbinger cruiser and was turning its own weapons against other enemy ships. Captain Hyunji's swarm had destroyed 2 more Harbinger vessels and was moving toward a third. For the first time since the war began, the Void Harbingers were retreating. The humans pressed forward because that was what humans did. They never knew when to quit. The rebuilt Galactic Confederation Assembly Hall was filled with representatives from 47 different species, but all eyes were on the small group of humans standing at the center of the chamber. Fleet Admiral Young-Soo Choi looked older than his years, his uniform bearing the scars of countless battles, his hair now completely gray from the stress of the past 8 months. The final Harbinger fleet had been destroyed 3 weeks ago in the Battle of the Void Gate, where Admiral Young-Soo had led a desperate assault into the heart of enemy territory. The ancient terror that had consumed 17 star systems was finally gone, driven back into the dark spaces between galaxies where they had slept for millions of years. Chancellor Mordun stood at his podium, his crystalline form glowing with what the humans had learned was deep emotion. "On behalf of every living being in this galaxy," he began, his voice echoing through the vast chamber, "we offer our eternal gratitude to the human species. You answered our call when no one else would. You fought when victory seemed impossible. You saved us all." The chamber erupted in applause that lasted for several minutes. Representatives who had never seen a human before the war now stood to honor these strange warriors who had accomplished the impossible. "Therefore," Chancellor Mordun continued when the noise died down, "the Galactic Confederation unanimously offers humanity not just membership in our alliance, but leadership of our combined military forces. Your species has proven itself to be the greatest warriors in galactic history. We would be honored to serve under human command." Admiral Young-Soo exchanged glances with his surviving officers. Captain Mi-young-han, who had lost her left arm during a boarding action but continued to command her ship with prosthetic limbs. Engineer Sojin Kwan, whose weapon modifications had revolutionized Confederation military technology. Lieutenant Commander Ji-hoon Park, whose tactical innovations were now studied in military academies across dozens of worlds. Captain Dae-ho Kim, now promoted to admiral after his heroic defense of the Proxima Line, stepped forward. The chamber fell silent as he prepared to speak. "With the greatest respect, Chancellor Mordun," Dae-ho said in his careful diplomatic voice, "we must decline your offer." Shocked murmurs filled the hall. Ambassador Veltar, who had become close friends with many human officers during the war, looked confused and hurt. Admiral Young-Soo moved to stand beside his fellow officer. "We did not fight this war to become your leaders," he explained. "We fought because it was the right thing to do. We will gladly join your confederation as equal partners, nothing more and nothing less." Captain Mi-young stepped forward, her prosthetic hand gleaming in the chamber's light. "We do not want to rule anyone. We just want to make sure that when the next threat appears, we will all be ready to face it together." Chancellor Mordun's form flickered with what humans had learned was deep confusion. But why, he asked. You have earned the right to lead. Your tactics saved the galaxy. Your courage inspired us all. Why do you refuse the honor we offer? Engineer Sojin, who rarely spoke in formal settings, surprised everyone by answering. Because honor is not about being in charge, she said simply. Honor is about doing what needs to be done even when no one is watching. The chamber fell completely silent. Ambassador Veltar rose from his seat, his tentacles trembling with emotion. Then why, he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Why did you come when we called? Why did you sacrifice so much for people who had rejected you? Why did you answer when all hope was lost? Captain Deho looked around the vast chamber, filled with representatives of species that had once considered humans too primitive and violent to deserve respect. Many of these same beings had watched human ships die to protect their worlds. They had seen human crews sacrifice themselves to save alien civilians they had never met. Because that is what humans do, he said simply. When someone needs help, we show up. It does not matter if they are friends or strangers. It does not matter if they treated us badly before. It does not matter if the odds are impossible. We show up because someone has to. Admiral Young-Soo nodded. Your civilizations are thousands of years older than ours. You have technology we can barely understand. You have wisdom we are still learning. But there was one thing you had forgotten. What? Asked Chancellor Mordun. Hope, said Lieutenant Commander Ji-hoon. You had forgotten how to hope when everything looks hopeless. You had forgotten how to fight when fighting seems pointless. You had forgotten how to believe in victory when defeat is certain. The silence that followed was broken by slow, rhythmic applause from the back of the chamber. One by one, every representative in the hall stood up and began clapping. The sound grew louder and louder until the entire building seemed to shake with it. When the applause finally died down, Chancellor Mordun spoke again. Then we welcome you as equals and friends. And we promise that the galaxy will never forget what you have taught us. Admiral Young-Soo smiled. Just remember the lesson, Chancellor. When hope dies, someone has to be ready to answer the call. Outside the assembly hall, work crews were already installing a new monument in the central plaza. The inscription, written in 47 different languages, was simple but powerful. In memory of 50,000 human lives lost in defense of the galaxy. They answered when all hope was lost. The galaxy was safe, and it had learned an important lesson about courage, sacrifice, and the power of never giving up. Retry.